Major Hurricane Fiona continues to impact the Turks and Caicos Islands. I'm Mike Naso with this afternoon update on the tropics. Looking out there, we have Hurricane Fiona, a Category 3 major hurricane, looking better than ever with a well-defined eye as the sun sets just north of the Turks and Caicos Islands. It moved through most of the islands as a Category 2 and 3 hurricane earlier today. It is now going to move probably to the west of Bermuda, but you guys are now under a tropical storm watch with the expectation that those winds are going to get close to you. And then after that, Atlantic Canada up here, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, you guys will be in for whatever Fiona is by that time, which could still be a very powerful extratropical cyclone. We are also watching Tropical Storm Gaston, which has developed up here in the North Atlantic, far North Atlantic. It is a potential threat to the Azores, and it's looking a little bit better organized. Could get close to hurricane strength. And then off Africa, we have a tropical wave that we're going to be watching as it leaves in a few days. Could do something. We got another wave here in the Central Atlantic. But what's going to become the feature over the next coming days is this Invest area right down here that I just circled in red. This is Invest 98L. And there is very good model agreement that this thing is going to move into the Caribbean and then take a track somewhere in that direction and be a significant threat to the Northwest Caribbean and the Gulf Coast of the United States. But let's start with Fiona. Obviously, this is the main game in town still. Hurricane Fiona, as of 5 p.m. Eastern, was at 22.6 north, 71.8 west. Winds of 115 miles per hour. It's a Category 3. A 3 and above is a major hurricane. This is the first major hurricane of the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. And if you count Tropical Storm Gaston, that means we've had 7 tropical storms, 3 of them hurricanes, and 1 major hurricane. And it looks like we're going to be adding to that hurricane list over the next week or so. We do have the motion north-northwest at 8, so it's slow. This is not a fast-moving storm. It's taken a long time to drag itself out. However, it will eventually move northeast and get swept out and then go on up as an extratropical cyclone by Saturday and Sunday here over areas of the Canadian Maritimes, Atlantic Canada. This whole region here is going to be on the alert for very high swells, dangerous rip currents, gusty winds, just a very strong tropical cyclone transitioning into a post-tropical cyclone by Saturday as it heads up that way. To say nothing of Bermuda, you're on the right side of the cone, and you are now under a tropical storm watch. Hurricane warnings, of course, still in effect for the Turks and Caicos Islands. The computer models, very good agreement. This model right here, the CLIP model, that's climatology. So this model that I just circled basically says climatologically what would we expect, something like that, where it gradually turns on out, and we pretty much have that as it kind of weasels its way around Bermuda. Bermuda, you might get off on this one. It might not directly impact you if it heads just far enough to the west and you're not on the right side. You could get off without a lot of bad impacts. There's a beautiful satellite imagery. This is the true color visible imagery. Watch how that eye reappears right here with the bubbling. It is clearly getting better organized, but like I said before, Fiona is not moving very quickly at all, and that's going to exacerbate any impacts that are still occurring there over areas of the Turks and Caicos Islands. Thankfully, the worst winds around the eye wall are moving away, but it did wallop them pretty badly earlier today. The rainfall has been the main threat with this thing, even though it's a major hurricane impact on the Turks and Caicos. In Puerto Rico, you had rainfall amounts 16, 18, 25 inches, probably over 30 in some areas, and that has caused just devastating flooding. We have had some loss of life. Looking at the radar out of San Juan, we finally don't have any more rainfall. I mean, some residual drizzles, but nothing like we saw yesterday and the day before with Fiona. Still some good rain here south of the Dominican. Again, they got hit pretty hard too in the Dominican Republic, but they should be able to pull back. It was a Category 1 hurricane when it hit Puerto Rico and the Dominican, a Category 3 today in the Turks and Caicos Islands. There's another look at it. Look at all the lightning showing up here on the right side. That's why if it stays like this and it intensifies, it is forecast to become a Category 4 hurricane, about 140 miles an hour, extremely dangerous. If Bermuda ends up in the right front quadrant of that hurricane, that would be very, very devastating. Thankfully, we're thinking it's going to remain just to the west, But again, looking at that there, it's trying. It's moving north. It doesn't have a lot of steering flow. It's waiting for that trough to sweep on up and push it out. Gaston, Tropical Storm Gaston, is at 34.7 north, 44.4 west. Winds of 40. It's moving north-northeast at 17. It should mill around here over the weekend by the Azores and then eventually move on out. And again, it is a weak tropical storm, although if you look at the computer models, they're in good agreement to keep it out to sea. Kind of a weird track there, but nevertheless, it's going to mill around in the North Atlantic. But looking at that infrared satellite, we are starting to see what could be an I-type feature there. So don't be shocked if Gaston finds a way to crank up to a hurricane real fast. That happens with these systems sometimes as they interact with fronts up in the North Atlantic. We saw that with Hurricane Danielle a couple of weeks ago. Now, we're going to shift gears away from Gaston to this wave right here. Now, when we look at it, you're going, Mike, what is the hoopla with this wave? It's not that impressive. Well, you're right. Hurricane Fiona's outflow is shearing it. You could see that even better when I put this arrow on. Watch how the outflow here is just ripping right into the top of our wave. However, as time goes on, this wave is expected to move west-northwest into the Caribbean Sea, and you can see there the computer models start to gain latitude in the Western Caribbean and strengthen it a lot and make it a significant threat to the Gulf Coast of Florida, potentially the Northeast Gulf Coast, as well as the Yucatan and Western Cuba. Now, this is the GFS model as of 12Z. You can see it brings Fiona up and out. Here comes our system. By, say, Saturday, it's starting to look a little more interesting. We don't really see development until Sunday, and then it takes off. It becomes a hurricane, and then a major hurricane, crosses western Cuba, heads on up along the west coast of Florida before finally making a landfall there in areas of the Big Bend as a very powerful hurricane. If that is the case, that would be sometime around September 30th, October 1st, we would be dealing with a very significant blow there for the western coastline of Florida. Here's the European model as of 12Z, and again, this is why we're so scared. It also shows a powerful hurricane taking a track. This one kind of hooks north of Tampa. I can't tell you how lucky western Florida's been with storm surge. 2004 Hurricane Charlie, a Category 4, hit Punta Gorda. It was so small, the surge wasn't as significant as it could have been. And then we had Hurricane Irma take that weird track, and it ended up not being able to have the storm surge it could have had. If this track verified, and we do have a system come over western Cuba as a significant hurricane, and then it strengthens over the Gulf of Mexico, and then it hooks right, and we have that onshore flow on the west coast of Florida, we would have tremendous surge. It's going to happen. The last time a major hurricane directly hit Tampa, if I'm not mistaken, was 1921. So what is that, 100 years? You guys are in for it. We're not saying that's going to happen with this storm, but the fact that the GFS and the Euro are showing this stuff, that is very, very concerning. Now, it's not looking all that great at all on satellite, and that's because of that wind shear I showed you from Fiona's outflow, but it's still there. And if it's trying this hard, imagine when it gets in a better environment. As Fiona lifts out, the environment will be much more favorable here in the Caribbean, the upper level environment that is, to say nothing of the water temperatures that are just boiling. We have not had a strong Caribbean hurricane in a couple of years, and these waters, this is high-octane fuel for any developing hurricane. So that is why we are going to watch this system very, very carefully over the next several days as it moves into the Caribbean. This is from 2008, Hurricane Gustav. Remember, a Category 4 in western Cuba slammed into Louisiana. Now, that was late August, but it was in a similar position as our wave now. So if you're thinking, Mike, that wave's so far south, nothing's going to happen, don't let your guard down. This thing is going to pool up eventually, and we're going to have to deal with it. So that's going to do it for the tropics right now. We're watching Hurricane Fiona, a major hurricane impact on the Turks and Caicos. Very powerful, expected to get close to Bermuda as it pulls on up and then impact Atlantic Canada. Tropical Storm Gaston, looking almost like it's trying to become a hurricane. We'll see if that happens. Right now it's not forecast to. That should mill around. More waves leaving Africa that we're going to watch. But the main threat after Fiona is probably going to be this tropical wave. It's not much to write home about right now, but it could really be a problem down the road, and the next name is Hermine. So we'll wait and see on that one. I'm Mike Nasel with the latest on Hurricane Fiona and the rest of the tropics. I'll talk to you guys next time. Stay tuned for further updates.